Welcome to Lyra Echo Stories, where every story echoes emotions, memories, and hidden truths. Step in and feel the echo of every tale.
I'm Rebecca, 33, and last year I sold my tech startup for $15 million. After 7 years of 16-hour days and sacrificing everything for my business, I thought my family would be proud. Instead, they handed me a typed proposal for how I should distribute my fortune, with most of it going to my younger sister Amelia. The betrayal cut deeper than any failed relationship or business setback I'd ever experienced. When they insisted I was selfish for wanting to keep what I'd earned, I made the hardest decision of my life. Before I share how I had to choose between my financial security and the family who thought they were entitled to it, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button. Growing up in Boston with my parents Martin and Eleanor and my younger sister Amelia wasn't particularly remarkable at first glance. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house in a decent neighborhood. Dad worked as an accountant at a mid-sized firm, and Mom taught second grade at the local elementary school. We weren't rich, but we never went hungry either. Just your typical middle-class American family. Amelia was born when I was 3, and I still remember the day my parents brought her home from the hospital. She had these big blue eyes and the tiniest fingers I'd ever seen. I was instantly in love with my baby sister and promised to be the best big sister ever. For the first few years, that's exactly what I tried to be. But as we grew older, I started noticing subtle differences in how our parents treated us. When I brought home straight A's, it was expected. "Of course you did well, Rebecca. You're so smart," they'd say, before quickly changing the subject. But when Amelia managed to get B's after struggling with a subject, it was cause for celebration. Amelia worked so hard they'd beam, taking her out for ice cream. I was the responsible one, the self-sufficient one. By age 10, I was making my own school lunches and helping with household chores without being asked. Amelia, meanwhile, needed constant reminders just to pick up her toys or do her homework. "Rebecca, can you help your sister with her math homework?" became a common refrain in our household. "Rebecca, let Amelia use your computer for her project." "Rebecca, you don't really need new shoes this month, do you?" Amelia's dance recital costume is expensive. While Amelia struggled academically, she thrived socially. She was always the popular one, surrounded by friends, invited to all the parties. I was more reserved, finding my companions in books and eventually computers. When I was 12, I discovered coding. My school had just gotten a computer lab, and something clicked when I first learned to write a simple program. I begged my parents for a computer of my own, saved every penny from babysitting, and finally got a second-hand desktop for my 14th birthday. Within months, I'd built my first website. "That's nice, honey," Mom said when I showed her, before turning her attention back to Amelia's drama club performance. High school only amplified our differences. I joined the robotics club and the math team, spending weekends at competitions. Amelia became a cheerleader and dated the quarterback. I studied relentlessly and graduated as valedictorian with a full scholarship to MIT. Amelia barely maintained a B average and spent more time thinking about which parties to attend than college applications. She eventually decided on State University, not because of any particular academic interest, but because that's where her boyfriend at the time was going. She changed her major 3 times in the first 2 years, from business to communications to psychology. Meanwhile, I was thriving at MIT, double majoring in computer science and business. I worked part-time at the campus IT department to cover my living expenses, despite my scholarship. My parents never offered to help, though they somehow found the money to bail out Amelia when she maxed out her first credit card 6 months into freshman year. "Your sister is still figuring things out," Dad explained when I questioned this. "You've always been so independent, Rebecca. Amelia needs more support." After graduation, I headed straight to Silicon Valley. The tech scene was booming, and I knew that's where I needed to be. I landed a solid entry-level position at a respectable tech company and threw myself into work, often staying at the office until midnight. Within a year, I decided to try my hand at my own startup. I had an idea for a specialized project management software tailored to creative agencies. I withdrew my modest savings, recruited 2 classmates from MIT, and we worked out of my tiny studio apartment. 6 months later, we failed. Our product wasn't differentiated enough, and we ran out of money before gaining traction. I was devastated but determined to learn from the experience. When I called home to share my disappointment, my mother's response was telling. Maybe this is a sign you should move back home, Rebecca. Get a stable job like your father. Not everyone is meant to be an entrepreneur. That same week, they loaned Amelia $5,000 to cover the security deposit on a new apartment after she broke up with her boyfriend and needed to move suddenly. She had just dropped out of college for the second time. I didn't move home. Instead, I took a job at a rising tech company, lived on ramen, and started saving again. Every setback was a lesson, every failure a stepping stone. While my family saw my first startup attempt as a reason to give up, I saw it as a necessary step toward eventual success. With my failed startup behind me, I threw myself into my new role at Cloudsphere, a growing tech company developing cloud infrastructure tools. I was determined to absorb everything I could about building successful tech products. I worked 16-hour days, volunteered for the most challenging projects, and meticulously documented what worked and what didn't. It was at Cloudsphere that I met Taylor, the VP of product who would become my mentor. Taylor was brilliant, tough, and didn't suffer fools gladly. When I pitched an idea for improving our onboarding process during an all-hands meeting, Taylor pulled me aside afterward. That took guts, she said. Most people here just nod along. Have coffee with me tomorrow. That coffee turned into weekly mentorship sessions. Taylor saw something in me that even I didn't fully recognize yet. She pushed me harder than anyone ever had, critiquing my ideas ruthlessly but constructively. Under her guidance, I grew exponentially. You have found her potential, she told me after I'd been at the company for 18 months. But you need to round out your skills first. My typical day started at 6 in the morning and ended well past 10 at night. While my colleagues headed out for happy hours, I was taking online courses in financial modeling and marketing psychology. While they spent weekends at Napa wineries, I was building prototypes for my next business idea. The distance between my family and me grew naturally. I called home every other Sunday, but the conversations became increasingly shallow. My parents would spend 20 minutes detailing Amelia's latest drama, her new boyfriend Jackson who played in a band, her latest job at a boutique that she was really excited about, the trip they were helping her finance to find herself. When they asked about my life, it was perfunctory. Work is good, was all they seemed to want to hear before steering the conversation back to Amelia's world. Visits home dwindled to major holidays, and even those were strained. Thanksgiving of 2017 stands out in my memory. I'd just been promoted to senior product manager, a significant achievement that had required tremendous effort. When I shared the news, my father nodded and said, "That's nice," before immediately turning to Amelia's announcement that she was thinking about taking photography classes. For 30 minutes, the conversation revolved around what camera my parents should buy her and how she might turn this into a career. My promotion was never mentioned again. Meanwhile, I was quietly laying the groundwork for my second startup attempt. I'd identified a genuine gap in the market. Small to medium businesses needed better tools to analyze customer behavior across multiple platforms. The existing solutions were either too expensive, too complex, or too simplistic. I secured a small seed investment from an angel investor who had worked with Taylor previously. With just enough funding to give myself a 6-month runway, I left Cloudsphere and launched InsightPath. This time, I was solo founder, working from my apartment that doubled as an office. Those early days were intensely lonely. I'd wake up, walk 3 feet to my desk, and work until I collapsed into bed. My social life was non-existent. A brief relationship with Adrian, a software engineer I'd met at a hackathon, fizzled after 2 months because I couldn't make time for regular dates. "I really like you, Rebecca," he said during our breakup conversation, "but it feels like I'm dating your laptop." He wasn't wrong. InsightPath consumed me. I was the developer, the customer support, the sales team, and the janitor. Every minor victory, the first paying customer, the first positive review, the first day without a critical bug, kept me going through the darkest moments of doubt. While I was pouring my life into my business, Amelia's life was taking predictable turns. She and Jackson got married in a lavish ceremony that my parents paid for, despite their modest retirement savings. I flew in for 48 hours, smiled for photos, gave a generic maid of honor speech, and flew back to a customer crisis that had erupted during my brief absence. 6 months later, Amelia announced she was pregnant with twins. My parents were ecstatic about becoming grandparents. During the baby shower, which I attended via FaceTime propped up on the kitchen counter, my mother made a pointed comment. "It's so important to prioritize family, isn't it? Some things are more valuable than career success." The comment stung, but I was too busy to dwell on it. Insight Path was gaining traction. A tech blog had featured us in a roundup of promising startups, and our user base was growing steadily. I was still operating on a shoestring budget, paying myself just enough to cover rent and ramen, but reinvesting every additional dollar back into the business. Then came the breakthrough. A mid-sized e-commerce company with over 100 retail locations signed on as our biggest client yet. Their annual contract single-handedly extended our runway by 8 months. More importantly, their public testimonial opened doors to other clients. Suddenly, Insight Path wasn't just my desperate gamble, it was a real company with real potential. I hired my first employee, a brilliant developer named Marcus who believed in the vision enough to take a below-market salary in exchange for equity. As Insight Path grew, my communication with family dwindled further. Quarterly phone calls, birthday texts, Christmas gifts ordered online and shipped directly. I missed the twins' birth and their first birthday. I rationalized that I was building something that would eventually make my family proud, something that would secure all our futures. How wrong I was. Insight Path's growth accelerated beyond my most optimistic projections. With our first major client as a reference, we secured 5 more substantial accounts within 2 months. The revenue allowed me to hire a small but mighty team, 2 more developers, a UX designer, and a part-time customer success manager. We moved out of my apartment into a real office. Nothing fancy, just a converted warehouse space shared with 3 other startups, but it felt monumental. For the first time, Insight Path existed as more than just my obsession. It had physical presence, a team, a culture. Our product was evolving rapidly based on customer feedback. What had started as a simple analytics tool was becoming an integrated platform that provided actionable insights about customer behavior. We weren't just showing businesses what their customers were doing, we were helping them understand why and suggesting how to respond. The tech press started to take notice. TechCrunch featured us in an article about emerging analytics platforms. Product Hunt featured our latest release. We were invited to demo at a prestigious startup showcase. Then came the validation I hadn't dared hope for, our first $1 million valuation after a small funding round. Seeing that number on the term sheet nearly brought me to tears. All the sleepless nights, the missed holidays, the non-existent social life, it was starting to pay off. With the business finally stable, I decided it was time to reconnect with my family. It had been nearly 2 years since I'd been home, with only sporadic communication in between. I booked a flight to Boston for a long weekend, excited to share my success with my parents and sister. The reunion was initially warm. My parents hugged me tightly at the airport, and my mother had tears in her eyes. "Our big shot tech founder," my dad said, with what sounded like genuine pride. Amelia brought the twins, now toddlers who regarded me as a stranger, which was fair. The first cracks appeared during dinner that night. After a brief conversation about Insight Path's growth, the discussion quickly turned to Amelia and Jackson's recent purchase of a 4-bedroom house in an upscale suburb. "It's a stretch financially," my mother explained, "but they needed the space for the twins, and the school district is excellent." Later, when helping my mother with dishes, I learned the full story. Amelia and Jackson had bought the house with a minimum down payment, interest-only loan, and monthly mortgage payments that consumed over 60% of their combined income. Jackson's band wasn't bringing in steady money, and Amelia had quit her retail job after the twins were born. More alarmingly, I discovered my parents had remortgaged their own nearly paid-off home to help with the down payment. They were in their early 60s, with retirement looming, taking on new debt for Amelia's house. "We couldn't let them miss this opportunity," my mother said, scrubbing a pot with unnecessary vigor. Family helps family. The implication hung in the air, unspoken but clear. I was family too. I was finding success. Shouldn't I be helping? The direct ask came the next day. Amelia invited me for coffee, while Jackson watched the twins. We sat in a cute cafe that she insisted on paying for, despite my offers. "So, little sis is a millionaire now," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "The company is valued at over $1 million. I corrected. "I'm still paying myself just enough to cover my apartment and food." She nodded as if she understood, then launched into an explanation of their financial situation. Medical bills from the twins' birth had maxed out their insurance. Jackson's car needed major repairs. The house had unexpected issues. They were drowning in credit card debt from the wedding and baby expenses. "I hate to even ask," she said, eyes downcast, "but we're desperate, Becca. Could you loan us $30,000? Just until Jackson's band signs the record deal they're negotiating. We'd pay you back with interest." My heart sank. I had serious doubts about the promised record deal, and $30,000 was a significant sum, money that could hire another developer or fund our marketing efforts. But this was my sister, clearly in distress. After considerable thought, I agreed, but with conditions. I drew up a simple loan agreement with reasonable terms, a low interest rate, a clear repayment schedule, and consequences for missed payments. Amelia hugged me tearfully, promising they'd stick to the schedule religiously. They made the first 2 monthly payments on time. The third was a week late, accompanied by a long explanation about a check Jackson was expecting. The fourth payment never came, despite my gentle reminders. Instead, Amelia sent increasingly infrequent texts with vague promises and updates on the twins. Meanwhile, Insight Path continued its upward trajectory. We expanded to a team of 15, secured larger clients, and released major product updates that positioned us as industry innovators. I was working slightly more reasonable hours, only 12 hours a day instead of 16, and had even gone on a few dates, though nothing serious developed. Tech publications were regularly featuring our platform. An industry analyst report named us one to watch. We were no longer the scrappy underdog, but an emerging contender in the business intelligence space. That's when the acquisition offers started. Small at first, a few million from competitors wanting to absorb our technology. I declined politely, believing we had far more potential to realize. Then Amelia called again. This time, she needed $75,000 to start a photography business. She had it all planned out: a studio space, high-end equipment, a website. This would be her path to financial independence, she insisted, not a loan but an investment in her business. The timing couldn't have been worse. We were in the middle of another funding round, and I was negotiating with investors daily. I asked for her business plan, projected revenues, market analysis, the basic materials any founder should have when seeking investment. "I don't have all that formal stuff," she admitted. "But I know it will work, Becca. I have a vision." I declined as gently as I could, explaining that I couldn't justify such an investment without proper planning. I offered to help her develop a business plan, to connect her with small business resources, to mentor her through the process the right way. She didn't take it well. The conversation ended with her in tears, accusing me of thinking I was better than her, of not believing in her dreams while expecting everyone to celebrate mine. This created the first major rift in our family. My parents called, expressing disappointment in my unwillingness to support your sister's ambitions. They reminded me how much they had sacrificed for both of us growing up, heavily implying that my success obligated me to finance Amelia's ventures. Thanksgiving that year was unbearably tense. What should have been a celebration of Insight Path's success and my personal growth became an extended guilt trip. Jackson made passive-aggressive comments about tech elites hoarding opportunities. My mother sighed heavily whenever the conversation touched on money or careers. My father took me aside to remind me that family is the only real wealth. The final blow came from Amelia herself, who raised her glass during dinner and announced, "To those who have the means to help others but choose not to, may they learn the true meaning of family before it's too late." I left the next morning instead of staying the planned 3 days, citing a work emergency. On the flight back to San Francisco, I wondered if success was going to cost me my family. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning in March. The subject line was simple: acquisition interest, official offer. It was from tech giant, one of the largest technology companies in the world. They were offering $15 million for InsightPath. I read the email 3 times before calling Taylor, who had become not just a mentor, but a friend over the years. "They want to acquire us," I said when she answered, my voice unnaturally high. "Tech giant. 15 million. About damn time," Taylor replied. "You've built something valuable, Rebecca. The question is, are you ready to let it go?" That was the crux of it. InsightPath wasn't just a company to me. It was my identity, my baby, the thing I'd sacrificed everything for. The team had grown to 23 people who counted on me. We were profitable and growing. We could potentially be worth much more in a few years. But $15 million would set me up for life. It would give me the freedom to start something new without the ramen noodle phase. It would be validation that all the missed holidays, ended relationships, and 80-hour weeks had been worth it. After a week of due diligence, late-night discussions with Taylor, and soul-searching walks around San Francisco, I decided to accept the offer. The team would be integrated into Tech Giant. All employees would keep their jobs with improved benefits, and our product would reach a far wider audience than we could achieve independently. The day I signed the final papers was surreal. I sat in a gleaming conference room in Tech Giant's headquarters, surrounded by lawyers and executives, signing away the company I'd built from nothing. When the last document was signed, the Tech Giant CEO handed me a glass of champagne. "To InsightPath's future as part of our family," he toasted. Family. The word hit differently now. That night, I treated myself to dinner at the nicest restaurant in San Francisco. Alone. I ordered the chef's tasting menu with wine pairings and tried to process the fact that $15 million had been wired to my account that afternoon. I should have felt euphoric. Instead, I felt strangely hollow. I had achieved what most founders only dream of, but I had no one to truly celebrate with. My team was happy but uncertain about their futures. My few friends in San Francisco were also work colleagues. My family, well, that was complicated. As if on cue, my phone rang. It was my mother. "Rebecca, honey, your father's had a little health scare. Nothing serious, just high blood pressure, but he's in the hospital overnight for observation." I was on a plane to Boston the next morning, laden with gifts I'd hastily purchased: a premium whiskey for my father, a cashmere sweater for my mother, designer baby clothes for the twins, and a spa gift certificate for Amelia. The hospital reunion was emotional. My father looked smaller somehow, lying in the hospital bed with monitors attached to him. My mother's relief at my arrival seemed genuine. Amelia showed up with the twins, who were now 3 and adorably rambunctious. "Look who's here." Aunt Rebecca came all the way from California to see Grandpa. Amelia told them, and for a moment, it felt like we were just a normal family dealing with a minor health issue. The doctor confirmed it was indeed minor, stress-induced hypertension that required medication and lifestyle changes, but wasn't immediately life-threatening. My father was discharged that afternoon, and we all went back to my parents' house. The warmth continued through dinner, which I insisted on having catered to give my mother a break. Everyone seemed genuinely interested in hearing about the acquisition. My father raised a toast to my success. Amelia asked thoughtful questions about what would happen to my team. After the twins were put to bed, I stepped into the kitchen for a glass of water and overheard voices from the adjacent dining room where my parents and Amelia were having coffee. "So it's really 15 million?" my father was asking. "That's what the press release said," Amelia replied. "Tax will take a chunk, but still. Can you imagine?" "She's set for life," my mother mused. "She'll never have to worry about retirement like we do. Meanwhile, we're drowning in debt helping you kids," my father sighed. "The remortgage for your down payment, the credit card bills from when the twins were born." "Rebecca could fix all that with what amounts to pocket change for her now," Jackson's voice joined in. I hadn't realized he had arrived. "She's family," he continued. "She should want to help. You guys supported her education, her dreams. You deserve a piece of it." I felt like I'd been doused in ice water. The warm reunion, the seemingly genuine interest in my achievement. Had it all been a calculated setup? I stepped into the dining room, and four heads swiveled toward me. The guilty expressions confirmed what I'd heard wasn't an anomaly. "Rebecca," my mother started. "We didn't hear you there." "Clearly," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Is that what this is about? My pocket change?" An uncomfortable dinner followed, with half-hearted denials and attempts to change the subject. But the dam had broken, and by dessert, the true agenda emerged. Amelia announced she was pregnant with her third child, then seamlessly transitioned to their dire financial situation. "The timing isn't ideal with our current finances," she admitted, "but we've always wanted a big family." My parents exchanged glances before my father cleared his throat. "Rebecca, we've been thinking. You've been blessed with this wonderful success, and we couldn't be prouder. But as a family, we need to support each other. Your mother and I are concerned about our retirement, especially with these new medical issues. And Amelia and Jackson are struggling with 3 children soon to provide for." My mother reached for my hand across the table. "We were hoping you might share your blessing with those who need it most. Family helps family, after all." Over the next hour, their expectations unfolded like a business presentation. They suggested I establish a trust fund for my niece's/nephew's education by my parents' mortgage so they could retire debt-free, pay off Amelia and Jackson's underwater house, invest in Jackson's band's upcoming album, provide Amelia with startup capital for a mommy blog she wanted to launch. The conversation culminated with my father retrieving a folder from his office and sliding it across the table to me. Inside was a typed document titled Family Financial Planning Proposal. They had literally created a proposal for how I should distribute my wealth. I stared at the document, unable to fully process what was happening. According to their calculations, their collective needs would require approximately $8 million, more than half of my pre-tax acquisition money. "We've thought this through carefully," my mother said gently. "This still leaves you with plenty to invest in your next venture or buy a nice home in San Francisco." I closed the folder and stood up. "I need some time to think about this." "Of course, honey," my mother said. "Take all the time you need. We're just so grateful you're in a position to help your family this way." I checked into a hotel that night, unable to stay under my parents' roof with the weight of their expectations suffocating me. The hotel room felt both like a sanctuary and a prison. I sat on the edge of the bed, the folder containing my family's proposal open beside me. Each page I turned revealed new levels of entitlement I couldn't have imagined from the people who raised me. They had outlined a monthly stipend for Amelia and Jackson, essentially putting them on my payroll indefinitely. They suggested I purchase a vacation home that the entire family could use, but that would be in my name for tax purposes. There were detailed plans for how I should fund my parents' retirement, including a suggested condo in Florida. Most disturbing was the underlying assumption that this was the natural order of things, that my success belonged to all of them, that my years of sacrifice and risk entitled them not to pride but to profit. I called Diane, the financial advisor I'd worked with during the acquisition process. "I need your professional opinion on something personal," I explained, then detailed my family's expectations. "Unfortunately, this isn't uncommon with sudden wealth," Diane said. "Have you considered that saying yes to these requests might not be in anyone's best interest long-term?" She explained how financial handouts often create dependency rather than security, how family business entanglements frequently destroy relationships, and how I'd be compromising my own financial future despite the seemingly large sum. Then she asked if I wanted her to look into my sister's financial situation, given the significant amounts being discussed. I hesitated, but agreed. The next morning, Diane called back with disturbing information. A basic background check revealed Amelia and Jackson had filed for bankruptcy 2 years earlier, something they had never mentioned to me. They had a pattern of taking out loans they couldn't repay, opening credit cards, maxing them out, and abandoning them. Their credit was in shambles not from medical bills as they'd claimed, but from persistent financial mismanagement. "In my professional opinion," Diane concluded, "giving them direct access to large sums would be like pouring water into a bucket with a hole in the bottom." Armed with this knowledge and a clearer perspective on healthy boundaries, I returned to my parents' house for what I knew would be a difficult conversation. They were waiting for me in the living room, my parents, Amelia, and Jackson. The twins were at a neighbor's house. The staged tableau reminded me of an intervention, except I was the supposed problem that needed fixing. "We've given you time to think," my father began. "Have you had a chance to review our proposal?" "I have," I said, taking a deep breath. "And I'm sorry, but I can't agree to it." The temperature in the room seemed to drop instantly. My mother's smile froze, then faded. Amelia's eyes welled with tears with impressive speed. "What do you mean you can't agree?" Jackson asked, an edge to his voice. I explained as gently as I could that while I loved them and wanted to help in appropriate ways, the level of financial entanglement they were proposing wasn't healthy for any of us. I offered alternatives, financial counseling for Amelia and Jackson, contributing to a 529 plan for the children's education, helping my parents speak with a retirement specialist. Amelia's tears turned to sobs. "How can you be so selfish? We're talking about your niece's and nephew's future. Your unborn niece or nephew." She cradled her still flat stomach protectively, as if my financial boundaries were somehow threatening her pregnancy. My mother moved to comfort her, shooting me a disappointed look. "Rebecca, I don't think you understand what family means. If Amelia were in your position, she would share everything." "That's not fair," I countered. "I worked 16-hour days for 7 years. I took enormous risks. I sacrificed everything. And you wouldn't have been able to do any of that without the values we instilled in you," my father interjected. "Without the education we supported, the stable home we provided." "I'm grateful for everything you did for me growing up," I said carefully. "But that doesn't entitle you to my company's acquisition. So, you're just going to hoard your millions while your sister can barely afford childcare?" Jackson stood up, his voice rising. "While your parents have to keep working into their 70s? I never said I wouldn't help at all. I'm just not comfortable with the arrangement you're proposing." "We've already told everyone how you're going to help the family," my mother said quietly. "What do you mean, everyone?" "The extended family. Your aunts and uncles. They were all so proud to hear how successful you've become and how you're going to secure the family's future." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They had already broadcast to the entire extended family that I would be funding everyone's financial needs. "That wasn't your information to share," I said, my voice tightening. "You had no right to make promises on my behalf." "We're your family," Amelia shouted, suddenly furious through her tears. "We have every right. We've supported you emotionally all these years while you were too busy to even attend my wedding properly or get to know your niece and nephew." The accusation was so revisionist it left me momentarily speechless. I had flown in for her wedding despite a major product launch. I had sent generous gifts for every birthday and holiday. I had tried to maintain relationships despite the distance and my work commitments. "That's not fair, Amelia. I've always tried to stay connected despite building my company." "Your precious company," Jackson sneered. "That's always been more important than flesh and blood. And now that it's paid off, you want to keep it all for yourself instead of helping the people who've been there for you all along." "Been there for me," I repeated incredulously.
When?
"When I was working around the clock to build something. When I failed the first time and Mom suggested I give up. When I called home and all anyone wanted to talk about was Amelia's latest drama." The room fell silent for a moment before my father spoke again, his voice cold. "I think you've made it very clear where your priorities lie, Rebecca. Money has changed you, made you forget where you came from." "It's not about the money," I insisted. "It's about the assumption that what's mine is yours to distribute. It's about the fact that you created a detailed proposal for my money without even discussing it with me first." "It's just money to you," Amelia said, her voice breaking. "But it's our lives. Our children's futures. Mom and Dad's retirement. How can you be so cold?" Something broke inside me then. A lifetime of being the responsible one, the self-sufficient one, the one who needed less attention and support because I could handle things on my own, it all crystallized into perfect clarity. I wasn't valued as a daughter or sister. I was valued as a potential solution to everyone else's problems. I stood up, suddenly calm in my resolve. "I'm leaving now," I said quietly. I love you all, but I need some distance to think about what kind of relationship we can have moving forward. If you walk out that door without agreeing to help your family, my father said, don't bother coming back. Dad, my mother gasped. No, Eleanor, I mean it. If she's too selfish to help her own blood when she has more money than she could spend in a lifetime, then she's not the daughter we raised. I looked at each of their faces. My father's angry and flushed, my mother's torn and tearful, Amelia's manipulatively devastated, Jackson's coldly calculating. These were the people I had longed to make proud, whose approval I had sought through every achievement. I'm sorry you feel that way, I said, picking up my coat. I'll have my gifts for the twins shipped to you. As I walked to the door, the accusations followed. Selfish. Heartless. You're not really family anymore. After all we've done for you. I closed the door behind me, walked to my rental car, and drove away from the house I grew up in, unsure if I would ever return. The flight back to San Francisco was a blur. I sat in first class, a luxury I'd rarely allowed myself even after Insight Path became profitable, staring out the window as the American landscape passed beneath me. My phone buzzed repeatedly with texts and calls from my mother and Amelia, but I couldn't bring myself to read or answer them. The following weeks were among the darkest of my life. I had achieved extraordinary professional success, but felt like a complete personal failure. I moved mechanically through the transition period at Tech Giant, training their team, transferring knowledge, going through the motions while feeling hollow inside. At night, alone in my apartment, I questioned everything. Was I truly the selfish monster my family painted me to be? Was it wrong to want to maintain control of what I'd earned? Would a better daughter, a better sister, have simply written the checks without question? The messages from my family evolved from tearful pleas to cold anger to blatant manipulation. My mother sent pictures of the twins with captions like, they miss their aunt, and wondering why Aunt Rebecca doesn't love them enough to visit. Amelia texted ultrasound images with guilt-inducing messages about the niece or nephew I was abandoning before birth. My father maintained radio silence, but my mother reported that his blood pressure was dangerously high because of the stress, with the implication that I would be responsible if his health deteriorated. After 3 weeks of this emotional bombardment, I finally sought professional help. Dr. Sarah was a therapist specializing in family dynamics and sudden wealth syndrome. In our first session, I poured out the entire story, still uncertain if I was the villain or the victim. What you're describing, she said carefully, sounds like a lifetime of emotional manipulation that has culminated in financial demands. Your family has trained you to feel responsible for their well-being and happiness. When you establish boundaries, they respond with what we call extinction burst, an escalation of the manipulative behavior because the previous level is no longer working. Over the next several sessions, we unpacked my family history in ways I'd never considered. How my parents had subtly but consistently prioritized Amelia's needs over mine. How they'd come to see me as the solution to problems rather than a person with my own needs. How success had only intensified their sense of entitlement to my resources. The healthy path forward, Dr. Sarah explained, involves establishing and maintaining clear boundaries. This doesn't mean cutting them off entirely, unless that's what you choose, but it does mean being explicit about what you will and won't do. With her guidance, I drafted a lengthy email to my family. I expressed love, but made clear that financial entanglement at the level they expected wasn't possible. I outlined specific, limited ways I was willing to help. Education funds for the children that would be controlled by a trustee until they reached college age. A one-time gift to my parents to help with medical bills, financial counseling resources for everyone. I ended by stating that any future relationship would require respect for my boundaries and an end to emotional manipulation tactics. The response was swift and ugly. My mother called, crying that I was breaking her father's heart with your coldness. Amelia posted vague but pointed social media updates about wealthy relatives who abandon family and what money does to people. Jackson sent a scathing email accusing me of thinking I was better than everyone else. Then the extended family got involved. Aunts, uncles, and cousins I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly contacted me, some with direct requests for loans of their own, others to lecture me about family duty. It seemed my parents had indeed told everyone about my acquisition and implied I would be the family's financial savior. The barrage was overwhelming. On Dr. Sarah's advice, I decided to temporarily cut all contact. I changed my phone number, created email filters to redirect family messages to a folder I could check when emotionally prepared, and took a break from social media. In that silence, I began to rebuild. I reconnected with old friends from MIT who knew me before the acquisition, people who valued me for myself rather than my bank account. I joined a rock climbing gym and started going 3 times a week, finding solace in the physical challenge that required complete focus. Gradually, I created a life that wasn't defined solely by work or a family obligation. I volunteered teaching coding to girls from underprivileged backgrounds. I took cooking classes. I adopted a rescue dog named Pixel who needed nothing from me but care and affection. At a tech conference where I was speaking about my founder journey, I met Michael, an environmental engineer who asked thoughtful questions about ethical technology development rather than acquisition details. Our coffee conversation turned into dinner, then regular dates. For the first time, I was in a relationship that didn't feel sacrificed to my career ambitions, with someone who respected both my success and my boundaries. Meanwhile, I worked with Diane to create a financial plan that aligned with my values. Despite my family's claims, $15 million wasn't infinite wealth in expensive San Francisco, especially after taxes. I needed to be strategic to ensure long-term security while making meaningful impact where I chose. Without telling my family, I established educational trusts for my nieces and nephews, structured so that Amelia and Jackson couldn't access the funds. The money would be available only for legitimate educational expenses when the children reached college age. I made an anonymous donation to a financial literacy program in my hometown, hoping others might benefit from education my family had rejected. And I began researching my next venture, a platform to help small businesses owned by women and minorities access growth resources typically reserved for well-connected founders. 6 months after the confrontation at my parents' house, I moved to a new apartment in a different neighborhood and embraced the fresh start. Michael helped me unpack. Pixel explored her new territory, and for the first time in months, I felt genuinely at peace with my decisions. Your family might never understand, Dr. Sarah had told me in one of our sessions, but that doesn't mean you made the wrong choice. Sometimes the healthiest thing we can do is accept that others may never see our perspective. I was beginning to understand the wisdom in those words. The pain hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed into something more manageable, a dull ache rather than an acute crisis. I was building a life based on my values, not on others' expectations. And in that process of rebuilding, I discovered something unexpected. Family could be chosen, not just inherited. The friends who supported me without judgment, Michael who loved me for myself, even Pixel who greeted each day with enthusiasm, they formed a circle of genuine care that felt more like home than the house I grew up in ever had. 6 months turned into a year. Spring arrived in San Francisco, bringing wildflowers to the parks and a sense of renewal that matched my internal landscape. I had found my footing in this new life, a life defined by choices rather than obligations, by authentic connections rather than inherited ties. My new venture, FundHer, was gaining traction. We provided microloans, mentorship, and resources to women entrepreneurs from underrepresented backgrounds. The work was deeply satisfying, allowing me to leverage my experience and privilege to create pathways for others. Michael and I had moved in together, creating a home that felt safe and nurturing. Pixel had been joined by a second rescue dog, a senior pug named Algorithm who moved slowly but loved fiercely. My chosen family had expanded to include a close circle of friends who knew my whole story and accepted me without judgment. The wound of family estrangement had scarred over, though it still ached occasionally. I had maintained my boundary of no direct contact, though Diane provided occasional updates about the educational trusts I'd established for the children. My newest niece had been born. I'd sent a gift through my lawyer, but received no acknowledgement. After much reflection and consultation with Dr. Sarah, I decided to make one final attempt at reconciliation. Not to capitulate to their demands, but to see if a relationship might be possible with clear boundaries firmly in place. I sent a handwritten letter to my parents' home, expressing my continued love despite our differences and suggesting a conversation with a family therapist as neutral territory. I acknowledged the pain on all sides and expressed hope that we might find a way forward that respected everyone's autonomy. 2 weeks later, my mother called the new phone number I'd included in the letter. "We've discussed your letter," she said, her voice formal in a way that made my heart sink. "We're willing to meet, but I think you should know where we stand first." She explained that while they missed me, they still believed I had a moral obligation to provide significant financial support to the family. They were willing to reconcile, but reconciliation came with conditions, specifically, the financial conditions they had outlined in their original proposal. "Your father's health isn't getting better," she added. "The stress of continuing to work at his age, if you truly loved us, you wouldn't let this continue." The manipulation was so transparent now that I'd learned to recognize it. A year ago it might have worked. Now it only confirmed that nothing had really changed. "I'm sorry to hear about Dad's health," I said sincerely. "But I can't agree to your conditions. I love you all and would welcome a relationship based on mutual respect, but not one contingent on financial control." "Then I don't see what we have to talk about," she replied and hung up. That final conversation, painful as it was, brought unexpected clarity. I had done what I could to offer reconciliation. The door remained open on my terms, but I couldn't compromise my well-being by returning to old patterns. Dr. Sarah helped me process this final rejection and focus on the life I was building. Estrangement is sometimes the healthiest choice when the alternative is ongoing manipulation and boundary violations, she explained. "It doesn't mean you've failed or that you don't love them. It means you're choosing health over harm." The journey of healing continued. Through therapy, friendships, meaningful work, and love, I gradually released the guilt that had been instilled in me from childhood. I learned to recognize my own worth beyond what I could provide for others. Fund Her flourished, supporting dozens of women-led businesses in its first year. Michael and I got engaged on a hiking trip to Muir Woods, a simple and genuine proposal that reflected the relationship we'd built. My circle of chosen families celebrated with us, offering the unconditional support I'd always craved. I established the Rebecca Foundation with a portion of my acquisition money, focusing on technology education for girls and financial literacy for families. Though I never mentioned my personal story publicly, these causes reflected the lessons I'd learned through painful experience. Then, nearly 2 years after the final confrontation, an unexpected letter arrived. It was from Lily, my oldest niece, now 7 years old. In childish handwriting, she thanked me for the college money. Apparently, Amelia had finally told her about the educational trust I'd established. "Mom says you live far away, but that you care about my future," she wrote. "I want to be a computer person like you someday." She had included a crayon drawing of what appeared to be a woman with a computer and a dog. It was signed Love, Lily, with a row of X's and O's. That simple letter brought both tears and hope. Perhaps the next generation wouldn't carry the same patterns of entitlement and manipulation. Perhaps, years from now, there might be a relationship possible with my nieces and nephews based on genuine connection rather than financial expectation. For now, though, I focused on the life I'd created, a life rich in purpose, love, and authentic relationships. The $15 million that had been the catalyst for so much family conflict had ultimately given me something far more valuable than material wealth: the clarity to recognize toxic dynamics and the courage to choose a different path. Looking back at the painful journey from startup founder to family outcast to a woman at peace with her choices, I realized money hadn't changed me as my father had accused. It had simply revealed the truth that had always been there, beneath the surface of our family dynamics. True family, whether blood relations or chosen connections, supports your growth rather than exploiting your success. Real love doesn't come with financial conditions or emotional manipulation. Genuine relationships thrive on mutual respect, not one-sided obligation. These were the lessons I carried forward, lessons purchased at great emotional cost but worth every painful penny for the freedom and authenticity they made possible. What's your definition of family? Is it determined by blood or by how people treat you? Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with loved ones? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real-life experiences. Remember that you deserve relationships built on mutual respect, not obligation. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I hope it helps anyone facing similar challenges to find their own path to peace.